Very excited for our next guest. I'm a huge fan of the band Avenged Sevenfold, and they've got a new album, comes out June 2. You can actually pre-order that now, but this new single is very unique, very artistic. Lead singer of Avenged Sevenfold, M. Shadows. Dude, this new song, I got to tell you, when I first heard it, all right, let me just tell you, this is you know the scene in Bohemian Rhapsody when they're sitting in front of the lawyer and he goes, "It's too long. It's just not right. It's not Queen." That's the vibe I got. That's how awesome it is. I really like it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. We had been living with it for so long that that sort of feeling wore off. But I remember when we first wrote it, there was definitely like, this is different. But we were quickly reminded day one when this thing released, watching some of the YouTube reacts sort of things. And people are just like, all right, ready for this banger. And they put it on and you just see their face just kind of drop like, what is this? Like, is it like, what's going on here? And so we were actually sending those around to each other, just cracking up, like, give it a couple days. People are going to understand it. But it was really fun to kind of get smacked in the face with reality of how people are going to take this right off the bat.
So is that a learned trait, doing this for so long? I mean, with live albums, studio albums, soundtracks, this will be your 10th album. So you've been there and you've done that. I remember going back to, you guys, City of Evil, even, 3 albums in, I believe. So when you get that kind of feedback, which you can't expect it all to be positive, is it easier to deal with it now?
I don't care about the feedback. My worldview now is to make bold art and put it out there and let it exist. And it just is what it is. And there will always be somebody, if you feel it, there will always be somebody out there that feels it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the fan of the last record or the record from 2001 or 5 is going to necessarily be the right audience for what you're doing now. And so artists or musicians can go one of two ways. You can write for a certain sort of success and kind of chase the ambulance, as people would say, and just kind of say, well, what's happening now and what are people going to love? Or you write what you want. And if that happens to be what that is, then do that. But we're just trying to write things that we feel are unique, that we feel we haven't heard before, that we feel a weightiness to it and something that is meaningful to what we're going through in our lives at 41. And then you put it out there and you just kind of, at that point, who cares, right? It's like, it's out there. This is how we feel. There will be people that react to it in positive ways and negative ways. It's okay.
Isn't that though, like when you first start off as an artist, at least in the mainstream world, right? You kind of have are being coached with a little bit of a blueprint in order to get on the map, so to speak. And then once you make it and you're a name and you really can do what you want, now it's time for you to do you and not really worry about what the execs or the labels or the people are saying. You just have to get your art out there. Is that kind of how it goes?
I think sometimes, but I also think sometimes you get this sort of audience capture sort of problem as well, where, I mean, if you look at it, let's take the political landscape, right? Where there's people that have built their persona up on being one side or the other. And you get all these people that are kind of sycophants that will sit there and they're like, anything this guy says is right. And it's like very tribal. You get the same sort of thing with a band. Like, people build you up and they love you and they want you to do more of the thing they really like.
Right.
And it takes sometimes, we can call it balls or whatever you want to call it, to go, no, we're going to go over here. And we know that even the people that love us are going to be mad at us.
Right.
And even the people that never liked us because of record X, Y, and Z, they're still not going to like us.
Right.
So that takes like this sort of, taking off the training wheels and just going out there and deciding what kind of road you're going to take. And, I think on this record, we just took the road of just pure, audio form of what we want to hear, what excited us. There's a lot of left turns, a lot of rules broken, but anyone that knows our career 20 years, we know the rules, but once you know the rules, you can break them a little better.
Sure.
And so that's kind of what we did on this record. And I think people will react to it just fine. I think it will take a little bit of time and people will have to get used to it. And then it will be, then we'll do another record and they'll be mad that it's not more of this.
Well, and that's the good stuff, right? That's the, I always say conflict builds character. And It's the, at first it wasn't, just it didn't taste right, but man, I'm craving it. I need it again. And I see what you're talking about, at least like with the Single Nobody. It's not maybe your typical Avenged Sevenfold. It's not the scream or anything like that, but it's so story driven. It's very operatic. It's very methodical. And the beginning with that crunchy sound, I can just see that, especially as like a curtain jerking song for a live show. When you hear it, it's in it, in it, in it. And I can feel it. Like I can feel it just listening to it through the speakers, but I can feel it and see it live.
Yeah, and one thing, it's very lyric driven because it really is an existential crisis with this kind of sort of thing we all deal with, which is death looming, right? And it goes into a lot of mindfulness and a lot of almost Buddhist teachings where when death is always looming, there's two ways to go about it. If you find life is meaningless, then what purpose are you going to attach to your life to make it somewhat bearable? And those are very weighty subjects that at some point in someone's life, they will come up against, right? And we call that midlife crisis, or we call that existential crisis, or we call it this sort of like that shock to your body when you realize you are going to die and you won't exist at some point. And so we all have ways that we deal with that. But to talk about that, you need the music to have tension, and you need the music to almost feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's why the song was really driven around this sort of like, well, why are you not going back to the chorus here? Well, because we're trying to make it feel uneasy, right? The things we're talking about are uneasy, and they don't feel really pleasurable or release driven until we want you to get there. So I think there's a method to the madness, but it takes a second to kind of readjust and kind of go, okay, this is what we're dealing with here. It's not, 3.5 minutes, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus.
Right.
It's just different, and that will be for some people. Some people will find it later. Some people will find it right away. It's just, that's what's so great about this industry is you can put out whatever you want and people are going to react different ways.
What's your filter? Or who is your filter? When you sit there and you're kind of, everyone that has a creative gene, you and I, that's what we do, right? There's this feeling that you get when it's either not right or it's really right. Are you the filter in the band or something else, somebody else?
Me and Sin, we work on stuff together, and we have our own filters. There's definitely filters. Like there's things that we've taken out of our music that set off that sort of, we don't love it anymore. Things that people really liked about old Avenged Sevenfold. We felt there was a little bit of a sugariness to some of the choruses and a little bit of pop element that kind of crossed the line. And so there is a filter in terms of what is cool and going too far and what is just that doesn't work. But again, as a creative person yourself, you just have that feeling and that sort of threshold of like, that doesn't feel right. Right. Yeah. It's like that gut feeling like that. I could live without that.
Yeah. It's weird, right? You can't explain it, but you just
can't teach it.
You just got it. Yeah, I know. It happens all the time. By the way, if you could pass on a message to Mr. Gates and tell him that I spent my hard-earned money on one of his signature guitars. He is my son's guitar hero. And
nice.
So that's his favorite guitar to play, his Sinister Gates signature guitar, hangs on his wall, and he plays the living hell out of that damn thing.
I will tell him. Yeah. He'll be very happy about that. He'll be excited.
It's cool, right? I mean, to hear stuff like that, that's kind of maybe not why you got into the game, but that's kind of a perk to hear somebody tell you that their kid is a fan of one of you guys and you're the idol. Is that neat?
It is cool. And I think about him and I think about how much hard work he puts in and how, people look at him as one of the greatest living guitarists right now. And I agree, but I see how much work goes into that and how much insecurity and just constantly trying to push himself and constantly being annoyed at himself and constantly, like all these things you don't see. You see the cover of Guitar World, but the thing is that guy is constantly self-exploring, trying to be better at his craft, trying to learn new techniques. And if you asked him if he's great at guitar, he'd go, no, I suck, and that's like, that's just who he is. And so it's great when you hear it because you know the hard work pays off and it's inspiring other people to not be like him, but to push it further themselves and see where they can take the instrument.
Yeah, and don't sell yourself short, man. You were what, top 5 a few years back, greatest modern frontman, ultimate guitar, put you on that list.
I don't know. I think that's on my Wikipedia or something. It's so funny. Yeah. I mean, those are just such music. It's such a
that's cool though, right?
it is cool. It's never bad to be recognized. But you don't ever want to let that stuff kind of you don't again, that's audience capture to me. Like they want this. So we gotta, like I was voted this. So how do we shred here or do that? And you just want to keep moving forward and just see where it all lays in the end, right?
I always ask frontmen, great frontmen like yourself, and those from like the 80s, where there was just a different kind of vibe, but that was awesome. Like what there's like 1 or 2 things that you have to have as a good frontman. I always tell people there's got to be like a femininity type of vibe in a good frontman, like a Scott Weiland and Axl Rose. These guys, there was a nurturing type of feel as they ran the room. Would that be accurate?
I think you feel that on stage for sure. It's like a performance thing, right? And it's like you have to be vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable and I would say another thing is a wild imagination, right? You go up there and like the world is your oyster and you can do whatever you want. And that's why sometimes, you'll watch people and you're like, what the hell are they thinking? That's awesome, right? Like, like some of these dances, I mean, you even see it with like Post Malone, like there's all these videos of him in Europe, or I'm sorry, in Australia, opening for Red Hot Chili Peppers, I think. And he's doing these weird dances and everyone's like, what's wrong with this guy? Is he on drugs? I'm like, no, he's doing whatever he wants. And that inspires people. Like I remember watching Scott Weiland and Axl and you're like, I would never do that, but that is so cool. Right. Like, and it's inspiring. It's fun. And that just kind of pushes everything forward where there are no rules. Do whatever you want up there. Right. And I think that's really cool.
Do you have something that scares you? A lot of artists, they don't talk about it all that much, but they've got stage fright and they've got ways to get over it. There's always that nervousness. And if you don't have that nervousness, then you're not doing something right before you get up there on stage. What do you do to chill a little bit?
Yeah, I think I could do a better job of chilling. I'm a habitual, like I warm up too much. Like you wake up and you're like, oh, hey, is it there? Okay. And then like all day you're just doing that. And that probably doesn't help the cause, right?
Yeah.
It's either going to be there or it's not. And I do get nervous when you have a little bit of time off or a new thing is starting and you haven't really done it a lot. Now there's definitely a groove you get into, and there's definitely like a normalcy of walking out there in front of a lot of people that is probably not normal at all. Mm-hmm. But like anything in life, you get used to it. But take 2 weeks off and you starting up again. It's like, oh God, what's going to happen here? And you definitely get nerves. I mean, everyone out there is just a human being, and it's absolutely nerve wracking. But you can also think about it as most of these people just want to have a good time and they're there for the vibe, right? And they're drinking and they're, sometimes you have shows that you're completely off vocally and then it's like your greatest reviews. And then nights that you just kill it and it was great. And then it's like, they sounded off tonight, so you got to remember all those things. It's like, it's more of just an entertainment product at that point for people to just have a good time. Yeah. And it's okay. It's not that serious.
How big of a rush was it? I saw you guys when you opened for Metallica, and what a phenomenal show. What was that like? I mean, that must have been a huge rush for you guys.
Well, that was definitely a little more uncomfortable because you're not in your setting and you're in the daylight and you don't have your toys with you and you're playing a quick set and you're the opening band, right? So it's a different thing because when you're headlining, everybody's in the palm of your hand before it even happens, right? Like they're ready. They're going to sing no matter what. Like you're not even going to hear yourself. When you're opening for Metallica and the place is sort of like slowly filling up, half the venue's full, you're in the daylight getting hit by the sun, like all these. So you almost have to go to war, right? Like you got it. Like you might have some people in the pit that are like into this, but there's a lot of skeptical, arms crossed, like, I don't like these new bands. I don't want anything to do with this. You know, I'm waiting for the real metal gods to show up. And so you have it's really a lot more, like feeling like you're going to war, to be honest.
Right. I remember years ago, early 90s, seeing Soundgarden open up for Guns N' Roses towards the tail end of the GNR run into the grunge era, and they got booed. And it was crazy just to see the disconnect between the audiences. You had like 25% wearing plaid and Doc Martens, and then everybody else, you had the bandanas and the ripped jeans and the long permed out hair. Such an odd combination at the time.
Yeah. And if you ask those people now, you know, who's one of the greatest singers of all time, they'd all know it's Chris Cornell. So
Absolutely.
it's like you just pay your dues and you just know, like, you think like if you were like Avenged Sevenfold, you might be like, oh, everyone here knows who we are. Like we're in the press all the time. We've sold millions of records, and you go there and you quickly realize that most don't. Right. These are people that are like, they've heard the name in passing maybe, or they not really a fan, or they're just Black Album Metallica fans and they don't really pay attention to what's going on. And so it's like, it's actually it's a little shocking, and it's kind of like really good to knock your ego down a bit and go, listen, there's a lot of places to go from here. There's a lot of people that don't know who you are, that don't pay attention. Like, how do you seep this into the mainstream a little bit? And, you know, it's just really interesting, to be honest. You go out there and you're like, wow, most of these people have no clue who we are.
I know it used to exist. I don't think it exists that much anymore in the industry, but headlining bands would pick bands to open for them that were good, but they weren't going to steal the show. If I'm Metallica, obviously you're saying no egos if they have Avenged Sevenfold open for them, because you guys damn well could steal the show. Is that still a thing? Like because you know, you guys just put tickets out for the second leg of your tour. Like when you're picking opening bands, you're like, these are good, but let's not get too good here.
I think there's a reality there, right? Where you might get a hot up and coming band like Avenged Sevenfold, but there's no doubt that when the sun is down and the toys are coming out and the sound is getting revved up, there's no way to compete with that, right? There's just no way that people there are going to care about the band that played the 1 hour set in the daylight with nothing, just trying to run around, can barely see us. There's like a little screen up there showing a little bit of us, and then everything turns on and it becomes the show. And I think Metallica was smart. You know, I know Lars had called me a couple of times about that tour. We turned it down at first. It just didn't seem like something we wanted to do, because we wanted to do our own thing. And he had called a bunch of radio stations and said, who's the band to bring out? And we happen to be friends, but he called and said, we really want you guys because we want this thing to just blow out and be great for the rock fans, but also have new blood out there. We don't want to bring, you know, an 80s band, or we want to do something that's relevant and new. And so they're very smart with what they do, but it would be very hard for the cards we were dealt to go blow them off the stage. It's just, it's not really an easy thing to do.
Walk me through a conversation with Lars from Metallica and turning him down numerous times to go on tour with them.
Well, I just, you know, he calls and how you doing, blah, blah, blah. And listen, we're definitely in a relationship where we call each other about whatever, like just stuff, right? Hang out with him whenever I can, whenever I'm up in the East Bay, when he's down here. But when he calls about that, like, hey, we're doing this thing, it's going to be great. And I was just like, we have only headlined for so long. And one of the things that we heard early in our career, and one thing we respected immensely about certain bands, is if you headline, people think of you as a headliner. And if you go and open for people constantly, they'll always think of you as second fiddle. And one thing I was really concerned with was, as long as we had been a band, we'd put out Hail to the King, we'd put out Nightmare, we'd put out City of Evil, put out all these records that had done really well. And we were an arena band at that point, and you could do arenas by yourself. So the idea of opening and taking all the toys away, everything everyone had ever seen, my question to him was, I don't think this is the right look for new people getting into Avenged Sevenfold. This isn't where we're at. But to a lot of mainstream people, it was, oh, you're the band that opened for Metallica, which put us on a higher pedestal, which was weird to me.
Yeah, right.
But then we still live with that where, oh, you guys were the openers for Metallica, which they see as cool. I see as, yeah, but we're Avenged Sevenfold. We're our own thing.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so the conversation just went, we're not going to do that. Then they would call CAA and offer more money. And we're like, we're not going to do that. And then then it eventually became like, okay, we're going to do that because we'd be idiots not to.
Right.
But I still walked away from that tour extremely grateful, but extremely, I think, right about taking that tour. It did put us in that weird position of you're second fiddle to this.
So it's strategy with you. It sounds like, when you're picking and choosing your spots, you're really smart. Like you're foreshadowing the future of saying, okay, how is this going to affect Avenged Sevenfold if we choose this?
I think of what the perception is. Yes.
Wow.
I think if you don't want to be particularly tied down to a certain genre or a certain, like sort of tribal area of rock, then you have to really watch who the opening bands are that you bring out. Right. I know that there's a bunch of bands that we could take out that we would sell more tickets if we did it.
Yeah.
But we don't want that look because then you get locked in. And that's why you start seeing these tours where it's the exact same bands going out every summer, doing the same venues. And to me, I would rather have less people at the show and be much more strategic or bizarre with who we pick or who we bring out. And that to me is just an artistic choice of like, we don't want to get pigeonholed anywhere because then the next call is, well, it's got to do as good as that tour because we did that last time. So do that again, wrap it up again, put a new name on it. And you see it. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. But we don't want to do that, Right. And so, yeah, every single like thing, whether you're opening or you're headlining or what it is, you have to really think about these things because people have a perception and they stick with that perception and it's hard to break.
Yeah. Explain the Avenged Sevenfold new Ticket Pass blockchain platform, the partnership, and that involves NFTs. Before you do that, about a year or so ago, you went on Twitter to talk about Ticketmaster. I think it was during like the Taylor Swift blow up or something like that. And you said, hey, look, don't blame them. It's the artists that set the ticket prices. And that got around, because I know fans were like, what are you talking about, dude? Is that true? So you've been kind of vocal about it, but very educational about the process. What are you guys doing with this leg 2 of the tour?
Yeah. So first off, imagine a world where you have all the greatest managers in the world. You have CAA, you have all these people involved booking these shows, right?
Yeah.
Imagine a world where Ticketmaster just opts you into something and makes all this extra money on top to beat the scalpers, and CAA, the artists, they say nothing about it. Well, that's because they're opting in, right? It's like, but the idea of it is not egregious. You have to actually think about it from any perspective. If you look at any market, the fan or the consumer will decide what market value is for anything, whether it's a house, a car, an iPhone, whatever it is, you are going to pay the price that it is worth. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with ticketing is if you give somebody a front row seat for $200 and now they realize because the supply and demand is out of control. Some of these huge artists, right? They're coming to the city one time. That's the only time you're going to get to see them for a year. Let's call it Bruce Springsteen or Blink-182, whatever you want it to be. What was happening is even these fans were saying, well, now my ticket's worth $1,500. I'm going to resell it. So the idea there is like, either I can take away the fundamental right of the fan to be able to sell something that they own, or Ticketmaster came to the artists and said, well, if there's a lot of, action happening on these tickets, they'll rise and then the market will decide what the value is. Mm-hmm. If they're not buying them, they'll go back down. So that's dynamic pricing. And the artist said, okay, well, I'd rather make the money than the scalper or the fan that's reselling. So there's where the rub is, right? So the artist says, okay, well, I'd rather make the money. I'm coming here once. I don't like the fact that guy made, $1,200 on the ticket that I made $200 on. That's just backwards. And I think any fan would agree with that. But where you get the rub is music's emotional, and music has all these different things where people feel like they deserve a ticket no matter what. Now, I'm not here to argue that or to be pro-capitalism or pro whatever, right? That's not my point. But the point is artists opt in. What we did with Ticket Pass was we were very clear that we are going to opt into those sorts of things. If we play an underplay and there's 4,000 tickets, we would rather make the upside. But if you use this blockchain Ticket Pass, we are going to forego that for the real fans that want to get the tickets in the beginning. Now, someone could say, well, couldn't a scalper get Ticket Pass? Well, here's where the cool thing comes in. We can actually track fans that are buying merch, that are listening, their listening habits, where they're listening on Spotify. You see at the end of the year, top percent of an artist. We can actually give them tokens and tier up their pass. Wow. So we know that they're bigger fans and we make sure that they get tickets first. Now, if they buy a front row ticket and they still decide to scalp it, I think that's their fundamental right as an American to be able to resell something that they bought. But we note the fans that are actually participating in our ecosystem are the ones that are getting the tickets first.
Wow.
And that sounds like a lot of convolution because it's a very nuanced subject, but that's essentially what we're doing as American Airlines for a band, right? You fly with us a bunch, you're always doing these things and now you're stuck. We're going to get you a room. We're going to upgrade you to first class. We're going to do this flight for free. So we're basically building out a system to where if you use your own habits that you're normally doing anyways, then we are going to reward those people because we can see it on the blockchain.
Wow. Sac State is calling right now, and they want to offer you a job as a professor for economics.
No, I'm good with just rocking out.
If the whole rock and roll thing doesn't work out, you've got such a job at some college nearby.
Yeah,
that's really smart, and that's cool that you explain it like that. Where I mean, we can understand it, but you don't hear artists talk about it all that much, if ever.
No, because and listen. There's a bunch of things behind the scenes, right? Ticketmaster would much rather do all-in pricing, right? So imagine you go to a Blink show and there's one price, not the added service charge. Right. But the reason they do the service charges is the artist can look good and then everyone can shoot the arrows into Ticketmaster's back. Ticketmaster has to make a living at some point. Now, some of those charges look crazy, right? And you see the ones that go viral and it's like, come on. Like you're charging $100 service charge on a $20 ticket. I don't know where that happens, but normally that's not what's going on. But artists are taking about 100% to sometimes 105% of the gross. And Ticketmaster, the only way they're making money is by the ticket charge. Yeah. Now, artists could opt into all-in pricing, but they don't want to do that because they'd rather have Ticketmaster be the bad guy, and Ticketmaster's okay with that.
Yeah.
So I think it's having an honest conversation, and you will get people that go, well, you're still a jerk because you're going to opt into dynamic pricing. And I would argue, I don't think I am. I think the jerk is the guy that makes 10x what I made when I was the one on stage and had to be away from my family. Yeah. Right. And so, but whenever you talk about finances with art, people want to really misconstrue both and go, well, you're not an artist because well, no, I made the art and now I'm going on tour. Yeah. And now I think the band should see the upside. But that's where I'll leave it.
How often do you, when you're out and somebody recognizes you and you've got a show nearby, give out free tickets to somebody that will come up to you? How often do you do that?
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
It's on the app, right? I learned about y'all's rock band app from the guys in Lit, and I ran into them, and I didn't even know that they were in town. I was actually there for Bret Michaels for a show, and they came out they were like on tour with Hoobastank and stuff. And they're like, yeah, why don't you come? We're performing tomorrow night. And I was like, oh, that's cool. You got tickets? I'm thinking they got tickets, and it was Taylor, the drummer, and he's like, no, but we got an app. And he pulls up this special app. I was like, that's way cool. I've been doing this a long time. I never knew you guys had a special app now. That's neat.
That's crazy. Yeah, there's so much new technology that people can utilize. But technologies, these sort of things are really, you're right, they're scary to a lot of people, Sure. Apps, blockchain, these tokens that we've been giving people. If you take the time to learn it all, life can be a lot easier. But I understand the trepidness.
Yeah. Well, look, man, I'm a fan. My son's a fan. We're all fans. I'm very excited for this song. I want to see how it plays out. I think it's going to do like what you're saying, is that and that's the good stuff. That's somebody, what? Oh, yeah, good. Kind of like the first time I saw Swingers. Didn't get it. Second time, got high, got it.
There you go.
And also the new album, Life is But a Dream, June 2nd. You can pre-order that. Avenged7fold.com. Really, really cool website. Whatever one you pick, 2 or 3, you guys are always doing some cool stuff. So I dig it. And M Shadows, Matt, thank you so much, brother, for coming on, and best of luck, and hope to talk to you again soon. All right.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.